Hello and welcome to the Indigipreneur, the show that gives you the latest news relating to First Nations entrepreneurship. Yes, it actually does exist, with news, analysis, and comment from Barayamal, the world's first Indigenous Accelerator program. So today we're going to discuss the ins and outs of one of the most important federal government budgets since World War II, which aims to get us out of our first recession since 30 years ago. Long story short, the Morrison government is trusting and hoping on a business-led recovery that aims to create jobs. Jobs. That's what they always promise, isn't it? We'll see how that goes. But what's in it specifically for First Nations people? So what did they get out of it? Basically, the same old story. They actually got nothing. There was no new funding allocated specifically for Indigenous people, and any new projects or funding will come out of the National Indigenous Australian Agency's existing budget. Ken White did say that the Morrison government is reforming the way it works with and for Indigenous Australians. However, if you're like me, actions speak louder than words, and not committing any new funding to help close the economic gap disparities and the new closing the gap targets, I think tells us, everything we need to know about how the government is reforming and plan to continue working with Indigenous people. So in addition to a lot of funding, Ken mentioned is actually going to non-Indigenous organisations, which the government has a bad habit of doing. For example, Ken mentioned IBA will receive an additional 150 million. 150 big ones will go towards IBA for the Indigenous Home Ownership Program for regional areas, which is definitely a good thing. However, they've received a lot of money. I think Ken gave them another 120 million, an extra 120 million for COVID-19, and every year they normally get tens of millions. I think last year it was like 70 million they got off the government, just normal business operations. The government in Ken's department is also providing 39.8 million. So 39.8 million over 4 years for the Clontarf Foundation, which is a non-Indigenous company aimed at supporting Indigenous youth through the education system, including 7.6 million through the Indigenous Advancement Strategy. So no new money, everything's coming out of existing funding that's been committed. We've also got 16.7 million in national partnership payments to states and territories for Pacific Indigenous health programs. So what's that say? Basically, a lot of money is going back into the government and non-Indigenous organisations. And what's the problem with that? I think, everybody's been talking about it. If you're looking at new ways of doing things, First Nations people can solve their own challenges. And the money is getting lost through administration fees for these, quote unquote, wealth managers, the government and non-Indigenous organisations that obviously taking their cuts while little is actually going into First Nations communities, which is a massive problem. It's been happening since the 70s. And nothing's changed. So hopefully, Ken, if you're listening and you're looking at new ways to, help Indigenous people, like what you're trying to do with The Voice, which is, cutting out the middleman so you can hear directly from communities. It just makes sense that you do the same thing with funding to, cut out all these middlemen, your government organizations and non-Indigenous organizations and start pouring money actually into communities where it can make a massive difference. So it's pretty much it. It's nothing too exciting. Basically, a lot of committing, a lot of talk, which is nothing new in the government. For First Nations people, if you can, let's step up and start cutting the middleman from the funding that should be going directly to First Nations communities as much as possible. I think, there could be massive benefits and progress to actually closing the gap instead of little progress and lots of talk. That's it from the Indigipreneur podcast. If you liked a little yarn, a little chat about the federal budget, what's happening, or probably more accurate, what's not happening still, share, and subscribe to Barayamal, and keep listening to the Indigipreneur.